Hello and welcome to today's webinar, VM Backup Strategies, how to manage and recover your data. This special webinar event is presented in partnership with our friends over at Veeam. Thanks so much for joining us on the webinar today. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the host and moderator here on the event today. We're very thankful to have our Actual Tech Media audience present here on today's special Friday webinar event. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions there in the questions pane of your audience console. Many of you have already said hello and good afternoon, and we really love to see that. Love to hear the shout outs out there. But we also want your technical questions on today's topic. Protecting and recovering your virtual machines. We'll be doing a Q&A session at the end of the event, and we encourage your questions throughout the event. We even have a best question prize to help maybe shake some of those questions loose, if you will. I'll talk about that more here in just a moment. But first, I want to call your attention there to the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find some special handouts. There is a link to the VMware Backup for Dummies ebook. It's a free ebook you can download, check out, read after the event. There's also information there on backing up not only VMware, but also Hyper-V and AHV. So make sure that you check that out. There is a brand new demo video on VM backup and recovery. And that's the third link there on the list. You want to make sure that you check that one out as well. It's a 7-minute technical demo video that shows you how to add your virtual environment, set up backup repositories, and create backup and restore jobs with Veeam. So make sure that you check those resources out in the Handouts tab. At the end of the webinar today, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found right there in the Handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize on today's event. What that means is that you have to ask a question to be entered into the prize drawing, and then meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions as well. We will contact the prize winner of the best question prize for a $50 Amazon gift card after the event and send that gift card over then. So, of course, we encourage your questions. We want to make this educational, as I said. We know it's tough out there in the world of IT, protecting your company's data from malicious attacks and ransomware. And that's what this event is all about, making sure that you can recover when you need to, because you will need to. And with that in mind, it's now my pleasure to bring on today's expert presenter. Welcome to Mr. Joshua Shapiro, who is an inside systems engineer at Veeam. Hey, Josh, it's great to have you on.
Yes, David, thank you for having me on today, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, take it away. Tell us all about VM backup strategies, how to manage and recover your data.
All right, yeah, let's do it. Dive right in here. I do have some slides, of course, because what's a presentation without some slides? But today, of course, we're going to be running through that VM backup strategies, how to manage and recover your data, kind of the best practices, and go through that route. We'll be answering the questions towards the end, like David was saying earlier. So right off the bat, you and I both know that, virtualization is everywhere. It's slowly becoming, let's say, even more so the standard industry practice than to run hardware locally. I find, over the past year, I've spoken to more and more folks who are using virtualization versus the old school. I say old school kidding, of course, but way of doing things, right? Allows you to do more with less, of course, because now you're just basically using compute power, somebody else's resources, and now you don't have to have all that good stuff on-prem. Some types of virtualization, of course, are going to be server. Of course, your storage. One of the things that just pops out to me right off the bat is having a copy of your information off-site, right? So that off-site storage, air-gapped, long-term retention. More and more folks using applications up in the cloud, whether, a lot of folks now on that O365 I don't know if everybody's aware, but Microsoft doesn't really care about your data too much. They are just responsible for the infrastructure working correctly. Of course, users' desktops, nowadays it's very important. You have all these remote workers from working from anywhere, basically. Is it important to the company to back up that person's workstation? Again, up to the company to decide, of course. General data, NAS file shares, things like that. And then, network, right? So it's everywhere. So virtualization, of course, is the foundation for the cloud. Main benefits, of virtualization, of course, cost savings, not having to basically replace that hardware every couple of years, infrastructure efficiency, smooth as ice, right? Less physical space, run your business without having to expand that back corner where you keep all the hardware. And then business agility. And really, this is really speaking to the fact that your data is so flexible nowadays that if I needed to run my entire production from another location that's not my production, you can do that now. And honestly, you could do that rather quickly. So it's great news. And then, of course, when a disaster does happen, you have that near instant data recovery. I don't know how many of you folks are aware, but Veeam was put on the map basically by this instant VM recovery, where we're able to spin up that VM off of the storage device and literally run that in your production environment in less than 3 minutes. So it's, again, smooth. Of course, you have that reduced downtime because things just get restored so much faster than they have in the past. And then the continuity for mission critical systems. So whether or not you're doing CDP, which is the continuous data protection, we'll get into that a little bit later, or just running regular replica jobs, I do want to preface that really dependent on what type of jobs you're going to set up is really dependent on what your RPO, RTO is, and that's recovery time objective and recovery point objective, meaning how quickly do I need to be back up and running, and how much data is the company willing to lose. Some questions to ask. I know we have a large audience out there today, and anyone from, I was a IT admin for a while before I came over to Veeam, or, could be a plethora of different types of folks watching this. But really, some of the main questions is, what types of workloads or hypervisors do you need to back up? So first and foremost, you need a backup of everything nowadays. And now you need more than one copy because, the long and short of it is there's ransomware is not going anywhere. How granular do you need to get with your backups and restores? Okay, do I need to just back up an image of a machine and be able to restore that image in 4 hours, 8 hours? Or do I need to just be able to go in there and grab maybe one single PDF file relatively quickly? So good questions to just mull over. What is the required RPO, RTO? Let me just make this clear that right there is to be set by either, the owner or the CEO, not the IT guy who does all the fixings. Because we all know if something happens, somebody's coming to you and saying, why is this not up quicker? And you're going to say, well, you didn't have a good RPO for me. So that is to be decided by, the main head honchos of the company. Does the company have any compliance requirements? A lot of the times I get asked if we're HIPAA compliant. The answer is it's not actually Veeam that has to be compliant. The compliance there is just how long do you hold the information for. So I think to be HIPAA compliant, if I remember correctly, is keeping your information for like 7 years, right? And then, of course, what is your retention policy? So how far back do you want to be able to go and recover information, whether it is a full machine or maybe just a piece of that machine? Do I need to just bring back a single virtual disk? Do I need to be able to load that whole machine back? How difficult is it to deploy or operationally manage? Well, if any of you folks are familiar with Veeam, you would know that it's pretty simple. So some of the best practices for VM backups, let's run through a couple of these. So not all VMs really need to be backed up. I would say first and foremost, you got to look at your virtual infrastructure and say, okay, well, what's this VM running? Do I need to save its information? I mean, now you're going to ask one person, they're going to say, I need everything saved. And then you're going to ask the IT person who says, well, that one's really not that important, right? I'm just kidding. We all have been there. So, of course, with the virtualization comes the server sprawl, meaning, you could have a VM over here, a VM over there that's maybe not that important. Maybe you can cut out one or two from being backed up, or maybe you do want to back up everything. But with Veeam, of course, it gives you the ability to prioritize which machines need backup. Now, you can back up a machine as frequently as you want, or if you have a machine that doesn't change too frequently, maybe you just grab it every once a week or whatnot. If you do use tags, that is a much easier way to also deploy jobs. And then it also makes the job dynamic. So then if for example, in the future, if you ever deploy any VMs underneath that same tag, and let's say you're doing job A is to back up VMs that have, that particular tag on it, as you deploy that VM, the backup job is going to notice and then automatically start to back up that VM for you. So it makes, making sure your VMs that are prioritized to be backed up are in fact getting backed up. You got to know your applications. So which ones are you using? Do I need to save them? Some of them may require additional configuration or manual operations. You have, of course, the data safety and transactionally consistent backup. If you're backing up any SQL machines, you have the options to see how you want Veeam to handle those SQL logs. So whether you want Veeam to back them up, or if you have a SQL admin that says, don't touch my logs, right? We could just ignore them, no problem. We have the application aware processing, which basically piggybacks off of the Microsoft VSS shadow copy, which will actually quiesce those applications prior to taking a backup. So you do get those granular recovery options instead of just having a crash consistent backup. Very handy for AD, right? So if you had to just restore an individual item instead of an entire database, clearly the item's going to be much quicker. You have pre-freeze and post-thaw scripts for, VMs that are not underneath that application aware processing, and maybe you do want to pause those applications. So that's also an option as well. And then, of course, backing up is one thing, but really it's the recoveries. So think about your restores. How are you going to restore those machines, right? As we come in here now and start talking into some of the recovery objectives, again, this is always going to come up because it's pretty important. So you have that, what are your recovery time objectives and what are your recovery point objectives? Because really I tell folks, and we go around in circles, is if you don't have that figured out, you don't know which tools you need to get you to be able to hit those RPOs, RTOs. right? So whether you needed a little bit of a more powerful machine to run something like a CDP, well, it could very well be worth it if your boss says, I need to be back up and running in 2 seconds and I don't care how much it costs. Now, we all know that's probably not the case, but you know what I mean. So the continuous data protection, we kind of talked about that just for a second ago there. It's, a replica of your machine and basically catches near replica changes to the other machine. And we'll go into it in a second on how it works, but it's basically filtering out the changes. Near zero RPOs. So this was something that Veeam had been working on for a while, and now we came out and crushed it because it is working so smoothly. And intended for the most critical tier 1 workloads. I mean, think about this for a second. So you don't really need to run a CDP job on every machine. Maybe some of the machines RPOs are like an hour, and maybe you just have that one file server that has heavy transactions and you want that one replicated because God forbid something happens to production, you can't afford to be down for more than 3 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever it is. The ability to do that is there. So it's all good. And again, just kind of coming in here. So backup and replication delivers the CDP. So as you come in here, of course, it is protecting those mission critical workloads with reliable, scalable, and performance complete continuous data protection. It leverages the vSphere API calls. So basically they go through on the Veeam side an IO filter that tracks those changes and pushes them across the wire to your failover location. You have the ability to immediately fail over to another point in time or a specific transaction. Policy-based approach. You set how often you want Veeam to move those changes from one machine to the other. Again, you could go down to 2 seconds nowadays. So here you have the recovery point objective as being 15 seconds. And then you also have now the short-term retention, which is going to be set to 4 hours. And you also get the ability to really create additional restore points every X amount of hours, and then keep those restore points for however long you want. So we give you all the options. Super flexible is the name of the game. As we dive a little bit closer in here, not sure how many of you are familiar with the architecture of how Veeam works, but basically you have at the top there the backup and replication server, which basically is the coordinator. Let's say we have location A on the left and location B on the right. On the left, you have a cluster running through that IO filter that's just a component of Veeam. We push that through our source CDP proxy, which is basically just a data mover moving from one location to the other. And then that's pushing to the proxy over there at the other location, which is then updating the VMs that live on the cluster over there. God forbid you have to fail over. It's literally a one-click failover. You can do things like re-IP the machines and remap the network. And then that way, when you do fail over, anybody logging in from the outside world has no idea you're actually running from your secondary location. All right. So then that, of course, brings us to that 3-2-1-1-0 rule. So Veeam, of course, added on that last 1-0. But going back to the 3-2-1 rule, this was developed by actually a photographer out there in the world. My guess is they probably lost their data once or twice and then developed this rule. So it's really 3 different copies of your data on 2 different media and at least 1 off-site copy. That's your production and then your local backup, and then pushing a copy somewhere else, whether it's to the cloud somewhere, or maybe you have a server in your closet at home you want to keep a copy at. Just as long as you have another copy somewhere else is really all anybody's concerned with. Now, as you go into that last box, you have that extra one. So air gapped, right? Means if I only have one location, I need another copy of my data somewhere else. It doesn't do me any good if it's in the next room over. That would be like having it at the same location. You don't hit all of your check marks. Now, Veeam recently just came up with the ability to actually run a Linux-based repository and have it as an immutable copy, meaning you can actually put a copy of your information into this Linux-based repository as read-only, meaning God forbid somebody got hit with ransomware or malware, it can't actually hit the backups that have been put on that Linux-based repository. So you could always then just restore from whatever the last restore point was that went in there. Now, a couple of other things here. So if you had a secondary location, maybe you put the Linux repository at the other location, and then that handles two of those. So that handles the air-gapped part of it and also the immutability part of it. Prior to coming to Veeam, again, I was in IT support. We didn't really have all these fancy things back then, but immutability nowadays is like top notch. And if you're not using that, you got to ask yourself why. The other way to get an immutable copy now is, again, we're talking about the cloud here. So you could actually use one of the cloud providers as a quote unquote immutable copy. You could have a copy locally in an immutable bucket and in the cloud in an immutable bucket. So you could basically be protected locally and in the cloud. That's probably how I would set it up personally, because I don't want to tell the boss I can't get the data back. But that's just one way to do it. I could talk about this forever. So moving on here to the zero. Veeam has a job that comes standard with the software, and it's called a sure backup job. And really, just to kind of touch upon what this does is you basically could test the backups that you've made to make sure that you could recover from them in the event that you got hit with some type of malware, ransomware, some type of situation. So the way that one works is it basically will spin up a small isolated lab on one of your production hosts that you point Veeam to, and Veeam behind the scenes will basically push out a Linux-based VM that separates the production environment from this isolated lab, so there's no communications. And then basically we'll spin up the backups in this isolated lab. And right off the bat, it comes with a couple of standard tests, like a heartbeat test to make sure the VM turns on, and also a ping test to make sure it could connect to the network. And then it even shoots you a little report in the morning, and it says, okay, these are the VMs that were tested. These are the tests that were done. And then this is what we came up with. In addition, Veeam has on the GitHub repository over 1,000 different script tests that you could plug in there. So if you were trying to test for something very specific, my guess is it's on that GitHub repository. Plug those scripts in there, and then it'll actually run that against the backups that you've already made. In addition, it's just such a great feature. You can actually spin up VMs from your backups in this isolated lab and do your own testing. So if you, let's say, had a Windows upgrade coming out, or maybe you were trying to deploy a new application, wanted to see how it would work with your current applications, You just fire it up in this isolated lab, do what you need to do. You could then either just shut down the lab and everything in there gets deleted, or you could save that VM and push it out to production from there also. So top notch feature. All right, no such thing as too much cloud. So really, again, another thing to think about, I know I haven't given you enough things to think about so far, is having that offsite strategy is necessary for the 3-2-1 rule. We just dove into that for a few. So offsite data center, you can either use a private cloud or public cloud. So just to kind of touch on this for a second, public cloud is going to be your AWS, Azure, Wasabi, Backblaze of the world. And then you have your private cloud, which is like a Veeam cloud service provider. So there's over, I'd say probably 50,000 in the world that we work with. And it's kind of like just renting some space out of a public storage. When you acquire too much junk, you got to just put it somewhere. Just teasing. So basically, you can offload your information either to the public or private. Both are going to have pros and cons. I'm going to let you look into that a little bit later because it depends on which route you really need to go. So you can do things like a backup copy job directly to a Cloud Connect partner, where you'd have to do a scale out repository with a public cloud. Is one better or worse than the other? The answer is no, they're doing the same thing. The replication, on the other hand, well, you can do that to a Veeam cloud service provider where you cannot do that to the public cloud. So that replication, Veeam's definition, is a true host-to-host based replica of your VM living in another location, just powered off basically. And if you would need to fail over, you could basically turn it on in a moment's notice. Okay, that is true host-to-host replication. That's not just having a compressed copy of my data sitting somewhere else in case I need it. So with the object storage here now is your public, and that's going to be scalable, of course. They'll give you as much storage space as you need. And then the long-term retention, if you have to keep it forever, number of years, that's the way to go there. Yeah. And I see all these questions. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to jump into the questions. I got a couple more slides here, and then we'll start chopping it up there. But of course, the ransomwares, we kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but it's always just so important. So don't let your backups be the backdoor to your security policy. You want to protect that data in transit, at rest, and offline. So Veeam, of course, allows you to do just that. You can encrypt the backups in flight, at rest, and it is the AES 256-bit encryption. Of course, you have that backup storage, whether you're going to do that local immutable copy or you could do the offline to another location. And then, of course, set up some rules so you can't have all the admins doing everything. So there is role-based access as well. That is through the Enterprise Manager, which is a free application that comes along with Veeam. We're not going to be talking about it today, but there is another webinar on it. Okay, you got your ultra resilient backups with Veeam, of course. This is that scale-out backup repository I was talking about a moment ago. First and foremost here, you have that performance tier. So that's going to be your local landing zone. Again, you could land here on any type of disk-based storage, whether that be your NAS, dedupe appliance, that hardened repository we were talking about. And then what it does is it just pushes a copy of your information automatically to, let's say, the capacity tier, which is going to be your S3s of the world, Wasabi, Backblaze, IBM storage, Google Cloud, Azure Blob, Amazon S3. Now, two special things right here, right now, currently with the Amazon S3 and the Azure Blob. You can push it to a deeper storage if, let's say, you didn't need that information after X amount of days. So, I would right off the bat tell anybody to say, well, keep at least a week's worth of data locally, because if you have to do a recovery, it's going to be a million times faster if you're doing it from a local repository versus pulling it all down through the cloud. So what they would do is maybe you keep a week's worth locally, you push the remaining, yearly backups monthly to the cloud. And then now, after it sits in this quote unquote capacity tier for a minimum of 30 days, you can then offload that backup again, even deeper into archive storage or, the Glacier. But just keep in mind, restoring from there is probably going to cost you a kidney, but it's there in case you need it. And then, like we were saying earlier, you could have the immutability from local to cloud. Really, not a matter of if, but when ransomware, right? I'd like to be able to answer that phone call and say, I'm not paying you guys a dime, and then just recover from an immutable bucket I have locally, right? Excellent. Or you could recover from an immutable copy in the cloud. You have the ability to go from a cloud to cloud recovery. So if you had a backup copy sitting in AWS and you wanted to restore to an AWS EC2 instance, easy peasy. If you're using the Cloud Connect, which is that private cloud, you can do a million things. If you were running replication jobs, you could basically then just fail over and run from the Cloud Connect partner. This also monitor environment to ensure data is protected, identity, abnormal activity, your backups are meeting your RPOs. This is going to be Veeam 1. So this is part of the Veeam availability suite. It comes with over 300 predetermined alarms, and one of them is actually called a possible ransomware. And basically what that does is it'll fire off all sorts of warnings when it catches one of your VMs doing a lot of reads and writes abnormally. So it's pretty awesome. So you can go in there and actually turn things off and on before it really becomes a problem. All right, backup, but more importantly, recover. What does it take to recover? When it comes to backup, think about recovery. Do I need to do an instant recovery? Is it an application level, site recovery, or test recovery? So instant recovery, again, Veeam, we have so many tools in the toolbox. I tell folks it really depends on what the problem is, on what tool you're going to use to get you out of that situation. So the instant recovery, you have the instant VM recovery, either to the same host or a different host. Now, what's really sweet about this is, again, this is the one that'll run the VM off of the storage device in your production environment in less than a couple of minutes. But not only that, but you can also use another feature called the quick rollback. So what'll end up happening then is Veeam is smart enough to know what blocks it needs to rebuild that VM on the production host and just moves those blocks. So, it is super quick. Application level recovery, of course, is going to be, maybe I just need one email back to this guy's inbox instead of the entire folder, right? Super easy. One item in AD, or maybe I need to restore back to a specific transaction within SQL. Site recovery, kind of touched upon that. That's going to be your full site failover. Maybe it'll just be one VM, really just depends on your company. And then the test recovery is going to be that sure backup that we kind of talked about a little bit ago. So recover, instant recovery by Veeam. This one here, again, is going from either VMs, physical servers, cloud instances, file shares. It goes through the console that you're using there, and then this on the other end, you can come out as an instant multi-VM recovery. So now instead of just one VM, you can actually do up to 10 at a time. The instant disk recovery, of course, is if you just need a specific disk boosted back to a VM. You do have your instant database recovery in case one of those goes down. And then, of course, your instant NAS recovery, just bringing back those individual files. The application level recovery with the explorers, this is kind of what I was touching upon earlier with your AD and SQL. So sometimes you don't really need to do a full VM restore. It's not necessarily the first thing to do every time you have a problem with that machine. The item level recovery can help minimize the downtime and your data loss by just grabbing what you need. And then your application item restore are going to be mainly used with your AD SQL Exchange, really, and SharePoint. I'm trying to breeze through this. I know we got some questions coming up here. Site level and disaster recovery. Just again, things to think about, talk about with the boss, right? Plan today, gain peace of mind for tomorrow. I know the sure backup lets a lot of IT folks sleep well at night, knowing that they could literally recover from their backups if they needed to in a disaster. The automating of the disaster recovery process, that is going to be through it used to be availability orchestrator. Now it's a disaster recovery orchestrator. Couple of prereqs with that one. You would need another location to fail over to, unless you're using it with a VCSP. But basically more along the lines of telling you if your failover plan is going to work. So let's say you pick, sake of conversation, an RTO of like an hour, right? You can run this program. It's going to literally pretend something happened and actually fail over to your secondary location, kick all those VMs on, and say, okay, you could either hit your plan or you can't. Think recovery, flexibility, what do I need to recover? One of my favorite examples here is, let's say you're backing up the boss's laptop, somebody spills coffee on it, it dies. You can actually recover that backup into either VM locally that you could have the end user log into, or you could recover that VM in the cloud as, let's say, an EC2 instance and have them log into that VM. Then at the end of the day, you back that one up, you got a new piece of hardware, it doesn't even need to be the same machine, and then you could just restore that backup onto a new piece of hardware and hand it to them and say, be more careful next time. Test. So perform tests for production VMs, verify the recovery, troubleshoot your problems, test those software patches and upgrades. Now, again, that's in that isolated lab that we were speaking about earlier. These are features that just come with Veeam. There's no additional charge. The data labs basically do all this for you. So staged restore. Again, I breezed over this earlier. Let's say you got hit with some type of malware, ransomware, garbage like that. You can actually recover that VM in this isolated lab and then say, okay, that restore point is still infected. I need to shut down the lab. Everything in there gets deleted. Or you boot up that VM, everything is A-OK, then you could push it out to production. Another use case is if somebody, GDPR, right? They want their name wiped from your history records. You basically could spin that up in the isolated lab, delete what you need prior to pushing that out there to production. So that isolated lab is money. And the VM best backup practices. Identify the machines that need to be protected, right? Maybe all of them don't need to, maybe they do. Totally up to you in the business. Understand the application dependencies. Are these machines mission critical? Is any downtime accepted? Again, all going back to the RPO, RTO, and then follow that 32110 rule. You'll only thank me in the end. Security, of course, top notch, and recovery is just as important as backup, if not more important. And sometimes I think people forget about that. So always talk about how you're going to recover after an incident also. And then, of course, we offer a broad, extensible protection platform. Protect and manage all workloads, data center, edge, cloud, apps, unstructured data, physical, virtual, SaaS, cloud. And then I do want to say that you can check out these resources, right? So first and foremost is that we like to have people try the program. Veeam gives you what's called the community edition. So you could have and back up, let's say, up to 10 machines for free, whether that's physical or virtual. Now, as soon as you go over 10, of course, you got to hop on that paid train, but try it out. Maybe you only have 5 machines in your environment. Well, use it till you grow, right? So we have a community edition of the Veeam Backup and Replication. And we also have a community edition of the Veeam Office 365 backup, where you can back up all of your Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. Up to 10 users is free, and that's full functionality of the software. Or, we do offer 30-day trials as well. Of course, follow us on social media. Sometimes they do some pretty sweet giveaways, and we're always dropping good pieces of knowledge. And, thank you, folks.
Great presentation, Joshua. Really enjoyed that. I always love the 32110 rule. I think it's got a lot of, practical advice all in a short little number there for everyone. You talked about the importance of testing. I love the community edition, both for, on premises and also for protecting Office 365. You guys at Veeam always do such a great job with resources and educational information. So I'm just going to go back to the slide here with the QR code. That'll give anyone who wants to, use their phone and scan that QR code and check out the resources here. Plenty of time to do that. So we'll just leave that up while we take questions from the audience. And we've gotten so many great questions. Thank you, everyone. It's time we'll play 20 questions. Looks like actually 25. I don't know that we have time for all those, but we'll do our best here. Josh, I guess I'll just start off with this one. They're asking, and you may have covered this, but with Veeam, can I restore to the cloud if I need to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you can actually either go from a local repository to the cloud. Let me give you a good example, David. Actually, if you needed to recover a VM, through the wizard-driven process within Veeam actually allows you to build the EC2 instance as you're doing the recovery. So, part of that is going through and saying, okay, it needs to have this much compute power, this and that. It actually gives you a rough monthly estimated cost of what it's going to be to run that machine in the cloud.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, super cool. So that way you're not hit with any crazy, costs really, or you don't have to fuss with going to like AWS or Azure first and saying, okay, I need a VM and then I need to recover my info back. It actually does it from the console. And when you recover into that VM, it's an image level of the image that you backed up. So really gets you back up and running relatively quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that kind of brings me to the next question here. And I'm not sure if this is in reference to recovering to the cloud or if this is in reference to just installing Veeam and getting up and running. But they were asking, how quickly can I back up? Can I be back up and running?
Oh, I mean, yeah, the typical IT answer is always it depends.
Right. Right.
What's the situation? Is the building on fire or did a VM just decide to conk out on you? Is the host there? Did the host go down? Do I need to recover to another location? And this is why I feel like part of the reason we give out the free software is so you can go and try it. And I've never had anybody complain to me after trying to use Veeam, which is really quite amazing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the testing. I mean, that's one of the reasons you test is to find out exactly how long it will take because, restoring a tiny VM might take a minute. Restoring a
Mhm.
massive VM might take a long time. So,
Now, yeah, no, and of course, no. Now, with that, also, I mean, is the instant VM recovery. So, no matter what, you can always be up and running on a VM. I'm going to say, don't quote me, people, but less than 5 minutes. And what happens is Veeam will mount that VM backup on the storage device. Now, I do want to preface this matters what type of storage device you're using, whether it's a SAN versus an external drive, right? Speed time. However, it'll mount the VM on the storage device and actually run that in your production environment, kind of as like a spare tire. Now, that's using some behind the scenes quote unquote V power to do that. So I can't really get into that, but just know that that's how it works. And then it'll actually migrate the information from your storage device into production in the background while that machine is being used.
that's really cool. That is Veeam magic right there. The V power, I like that to make
Yeah.
that instant recovery possible. So very cool, and that's something that I think folks should test out and see for themselves, definitely, because it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually see it in action, kind of like vMotion. The first time you see it, you're like, "What? Whoa, hold on, that just
Oh,
moved."
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
So
sure.
really cool stuff. Let's see another good question here. Let's see, so many good questions. Um, does Veeam's backup strategy work in tandem or include continuous data protection along with immutable storage?
Oh, yeah, great question. So it's really there would be two different jobs because the immutable storage is what a backup job would be landing on, as far as where you want to store the data. But continuous data protection job would be a host to host talking to each other.
Got it.
So it
Okay.
has nothing to do with the storage that your backups live on.
Okay. Another question: how does Veeam's disaster recovery orchestrator, the one-click site recovery feature, work?
Yeah, that's like a whole nother webinar in itself. But it really is. So long and short of it is, if I could high level it for everybody here. Let's say you have your production environment. Call it being replicated to a secondary location. Well, this disaster recovery orchestrator lives on a server in the secondary location. And basically, all you're doing is you log into there, and if your site A disappears, you just hit the start button, and it'll fire up your production environment on the secondary location the way it was running on your production site.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. And then follow-up question to that, does Disaster Recovery Orchestrator work with multi-cloud or hybrid environments?
Great question. For the moment, no. It is just for the on-prem currently.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, good question, though. But
yeah.
I mean, here and there. So at the end of the day, and I'm so sorry, David. But, at the end of the day, that's just coming down to testing and saying, is my failover going to work, right? That's what we all want to know. So because it doesn't necessarily work, quote unquote, through Veeam right now with the cloud, that doesn't stop you from, let's say, just failing over one of your VMs to the cloud and seeing what that process looks like.
Right. There's a couple questions here. I'll just kind of try to sum them up into, what do you think makes Veeam unique in the data protection market?
Simplicity. The user interface is super intuitive. You can probably just pick it up and go. And then one of my favorite things is that, our slogan years ago used to be, it just works.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I mean, God, there's something to be said about that nowadays. Less futzing around to get it up and running. Simplicity, again, secure, ease of use.
Yeah, and that's all too often looked over today, I think, in the world of technology. So many technology solutions, I'm saying in general, I purchase and then regret, my purchase when I'm spending hours trying to troubleshoot and wishing that it would just work. So yeah, I think that's a very important feature.
No, that's great. Thanks, David. Yeah, one of my favorite things really that not a lot of people know, even if you're in the console and let's say you're on a specific window and you just want more information about what it is that you're looking at, if you just hit the F1 key on the computer, it'll bring you directly to the help center guide of whatever the window is that you're looking at.
Nice. I haven't tried that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, give it a whirl. It's a little known secret, I would say.
Okay, good tip. Another good question here, are the VMs encrypted? Can we use that to protect the virtual machines against hackers gaining access?
Yeah, encrypted 100%. You as the end user hold the keys. Veeam has nothing to do with any of your data ever.
Nice. And VM backups can be immutable, we said, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, either, again, you can have them immutable locally or in the cloud or both. Again, up to the end user.
Yeah. Another good question here, can Veeam's backup system be used or included as a protection under a liability, a cyber insurance policy?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So really and truly, I tell you, the answer is it's you're trying to meet your insurance company's wants. So you have to kind of get what their requirements are. And the answer is just set Veeam up to meet those requirements.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. And I'm sure that's going to vary from one cyber insurance policy to another as to what those requirements are.
Yeah. I've seen a bunch of them, and everyone was like, well, this little thing has to be different. No problem. Veeam, very customizable, if you will. But usually, you'll see an insurance thing and it'll say at least one copy away from your production, and then some of them will have away from production and immutable, right? So it's tough to comment on such a broad thing like that.
Right. Yeah. Harvey's asking, what are the options when it comes to storing the backup data? I know you mentioned in the cloud. Yes. Can you kind of summarize the options there?
Oh, yeah, literally any disk based storage. So, let's say I got one VM locally I want to back up. I could put that on an external drive. I could put it on a thumb drive. I wouldn't recommend putting it on a thumb drive, but you can. A lot of people nowadays using a NAS. You literally anything that stores information.
Nice. Yeah. So
Did
many
that,
options
did that
there.
help?
Yeah. Daniel wants to know
Yeah.
if Veeam can back up Linux machines.
Oh yeah, top notch. It is no different than backing up a Windows VM.
Nice. There's a question out here. They're asking what support options are available for Veeam.
So with any of the paid versions, it's 24/7 support. And then you get the basic support, which is just email with the free version. So even with the free version, we'll still give everybody support. It may take a couple extra days, but you'll get it.
Nice. Let's see. Ned is asking, how does one get started with Veeam Backup? What do you recommend there?
Love it. Yeah, veeam.com/downloads and just download the copy. It goes on any Windows machine, and then you just add in the server you want to back up. It's literally just, you can read, like the window tells you what to do. It's awesome.
Yeah, I can say I've installed it myself numerous times, and it's always super easy to do. Just click, 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 and you've installed it. So,
Literally, yeah, nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, excellent. Well, I know we're reaching the top of the hour here. I want to respect everyone's time. We've got so many questions still. I'm afraid we didn't have time to get to here on the live event. We'll be doing our best to get back to those folks after the event. But Josh, again, I want to say thank you for the excellent presentation. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience did as well.
Awesome. Yeah, my pleasure, David. Thanks for having me. It was good times.
Absolutely. Good times. I always enjoy learning about Veeam and everything that it can do to help, IT pros out there who are really struggling to protect their data from all these malicious attacks that are happening day in and day out. So great information, a great tool there from Veeam. And thank you to everyone who joined us on today's webinar. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope you have a great weekend. And before we wrap up, I just want to announce the winner here of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. This is going out to Kirpal Panchal. Forgive me if I mispronounce it. Kirpal Panchal from New Jersey. Congratulations. We'll reach out to you. We'll also reach out to our best question prize winner as well. And then don't forget about the handouts tab there before you go. There's the VMware Backup for Dummies free ebook. There's the VMware Hyper-V and AHV resource guide there with Veeam, and the all-new demo video of VM Backup and Recovery is the third link down. Make sure that you check those out. Just click on those. Those will launch new windows or tabs in your web browser, and then once the event ends here, you can check those out. So thank you to everyone in our audience, and thanks, Josh. Have a good day.
Yeah, everybody have a good one. You totally.